All right. What comes next for the women's national team? There's eventually going to be a roster that's named for the World Cup in Australia and New Zealand. Vlatko Andonovski, in his post game comments, saying a couple of things on the roster outlook for this team. Saying, listen, if we had to name this roster tonight, there's enough here for this coaching staff to make and name a final roster. But that's not necessarily the case. Realistically, he said that there's around 10 to 12 players who are likely competing from anywhere from 6 to 7 spots on this team at the moment. He once he dropped that, he was asked to sort of elaborate and clarify on that a little bit more. But he said, hey, and that can change too. It could, 10 to 12, it could be 9 to 13. Depending on some other factors, because what happens now is there are players who are going to return to club and need to continue and keep up their form. And those are the two spectrums. Those are the two camps of players who are going to get evaluated. He said that he and the coaching staff will have those calls and conversations with players out of this camp. There's going to be, a group of players who they simply tell, hey, keep it up, retain your form, have good club performances, and we will see you at the next one. And then there's going to be a group of players that conversation is a little bit different. It's going to say, yes, continue to build your form, and this is what we would like to see from you within these club performances. Go out there and crush it. So still two camps here, but I thought it was transparent and honest to say that they're targeting a certain amount of players to compete for a certain amount of positions, and the remaining weeks of club play will go ahead and perhaps determine those things for them. Because something else that came out of this friendly, this second match against Ireland, was the announcement of the send-off game that will take place for the United States. They announced that they're going to play a final game in San Jose on July 9th, and then head on off to New Zealand. So we will. I think Lisa, it's safe to say that obviously sometime before that send-off game, a final roster will drop, and no deadline or no date has actually been placed on that. But if it's a July 9th send-off series, I think at that point you've got to have your roster in check. And I think maybe around June. You think maybe June we might get this roster by then, or you think it'll come sooner?
I'm thinking June. Honestly, I really think the way that Vlatko Andonovski still has, I don't want to say question marks or questions that need to be answered. I think it's more so there is the 10 to 12 that are maybe on that bubble for those 6 to 7 spots. Any one of them can go to the World Cup and perform for this team. It's more so who rises above in the next 2 months of club play, who can get the evaluation from the national team coaching staff, and whether it says I need to work on my defensive efforts, or I need to work on crosses into the box, or being more accurate, or maybe my fitness levels, and who can really smash those out of the park and raise the bar, because all of these players are eligible. They wouldn't have been called in to any of these camps over the last 2 months in 2023 if they weren't ready to go to the World Cup. And that's why this competition gets so tight at the top, because it becomes a bottleneck. All these players are there. They're all ready to play and make this roster, but who is going to rise above them and take that off? So no, I think it'll be June, mid-June, right, that we will get this final World Cup roster. They'll get called into a camp. I think some of these players might know, as you talked about, there are definitely players that are locks that they probably know themselves, but they're having those conversations with the coaching staff because they want to continue to elevate and rise above and make sure that they are ready to play, barring any injuries or things that happen. I mean, it's also their job to stay healthy over the next 2 months before this roster gets named. But once it gets named, the players will come into camp. Of course, us here at Attacking Third will do like guessing games of the roster. We'll recap it. We will have you covered from tip to toe about this roster and everything that is to be about the World Cup. But once the roster gets named, they'll get called into camp. They'll train together. They'll get some minutes under their belt. And then they have this send-off match in California against Wales. That'll be really great competition and a bit of a ceremony post-game for this team before the American fans send them off to Australia and New Zealand.
The other kind of main headline coming out of these two matches when they got announced, when it was, hey, it's going to be Ireland for the April international window. It's going to be the last international window that this team gathers before a final roster is named. Alongside of that, those kind of headline grabbing bullet points, there was also a lot around the players who were making a return into this camp. And we reacted to the roster when it dropped initially. I mean, the biggest name that folks were reacting to on that was the return of Julie Ertz after a near 2-year absence. But Kelley Herrera got back in the mix with this team after being away with an extended time with navigating some injuries. Tierna Davidson getting back into the mix with this team as well. Casey Krueger making her return post maternity leave within this camp. And all these players getting minutes throughout this 2-game series. And really within this second game, we got to see extended minutes for Ertz, going a full half, coming on as a substitute. Kelley Herrera getting some extra time. Tierna Davidson was the player to get subbed in to the game for Becky Sauerbrunn early in the first half as that planned substitute. And Casey Krueger coming on into the game in the second half as well. Lots of defensive players there. Julie Ertz even kind of splitting time, I think, in this second half. As a kind of a more defensive player, we saw them really kind of hold a 5 in a line there to kind of sustain, this very narrow scoreline. Again, different game scenarios presenting themselves for the team where they could try some things out. Julie Ertz, no stranger to playing more defensively on the pitch. But game 1 to game 2, do you like the progression that we're seeing here out of somebody like Ertz?
Yeah, I do. Honestly, I mean, I think we talked about this in the preview. Ertz specifically, I wanted to see her get 45 minutes. Right, she came on around the 60th minute in the first friendly, and to only get 20 minutes there, or 30 minutes, excuse me, and then 45. I think that's great progression. You do have to work your way back in as a player like this and kind of brush off some of the kinks, but the energy of the game changes when Ertz steps onto the pitch. She brings this intensity and this mindset that the game just has to be a little bit more elevated. And we saw that in the first game. And then at the halftime of this second game, as Ertz gets rotated into this match, but also Tierna Davidson. This was a player that I wanted to see get minutes. And frankly, the only reason that Davidson didn't start this game is because Becky Sauerbrunn was being honored for her 200 caps, was returning home to play in St. Louis. And so she got the opening 30-ish minutes, and then Davidson stepping in. But Davidson, to get 60 minutes in this friendly was massive. I mean, it's the first time she's played with the U.S. in a friendly since she believes in 2022, which was February. So right, like over a year ago, she got surgery on April 1st, but we've seen her with club, the Chicago Red Stars. She started both of their first 2 opening week games, played 80 so minutes in the first game, full 90 in the second. So we know she's ready to go at that level. So I'm really glad that she got 60 minutes, Davidson, in the center back position alongside Alana Cook. That's a lot of comfortability between those players there playing together. So I really, honestly, I liked seeing Davidson in there more than anything of all these players. For you, I want to ask about defender Casey Krueger. She got called into this camp for the first time since giving birth to her son. That was in July of 2022. But what did you see from her play? I mean, this was her first cap since 2021 with this U.S. roster.
Well, I think the biggest thing, Casey Krueger, we saw her out on the flank. And I think at one point we saw this player get on the ball, win the ball, and then all of a sudden sort of snap into the opposite direction, Ireland having to run her down essentially and stop her from going the other way. Had a chance to talk to her post game, and she said, yeah, she was like, I was headed straight for a goal. And you love to hear it. You love to hear it. You love to see it. I think for Krueger, it was just a reminder that she's one of the better 1v1 defenders, and depending on who you ask, the best kind of lockdown 1v1 defender in the world at the moment. And that was just sort of a reminder, I think, for folks who might have forgotten like who she is and what she can provide. I mean, Andonovski talking about her performance specifically in post game, kind of reiterating that. He said, "Yeah, Casey came into this camp, got minutes tonight, and reminded us who she is and what she can provide in a game." I think when it comes to more attacking minded outside backs, they might look for scenarios and players to fit those scenarios in different game situations. But I think for a first game back after 2 years, we're talking a lot about the players who have made their return. And like, oh, we're going to see them kick off the rust and we're going to see them get back to form. And the two players that we're not saying that about is Tierna Davidson and Casey Krueger.
I know. It's kind of crazy to see that. I mean, Davidson, though, like she having that partnership with Chicago Red Stars and Wolfsburg in
Yep.
Europe is massive, because as Davidson was looking to get back into play last like November, December, when the NWSL season was done, she went over to Wolfsburg and so was training in that high competition and high intensity setting that you couldn't get here in the United States. And that only becoming because of the partnership between Chicago and Wolfsburg. So Davidson also kind of having a little bit of a leg up there. We also know Casey Krueger was training with Chicago Red Stars at the end of last year. Maybe it's something in the water there in Chicago that they have a little bit more of a get back to the field game plan and providing these opportunities for these players to get minutes so they don't look rusty when they get back to this level and they're asked to play 45, 60, 90 minutes in a game when they haven't played with that team in X amount of years, frankly. So it speaks good for Mallory Swanson.
I love that. Fueled by the Great Lakes. I love that.
Exactly. And what pizza? What else is there? Pizza? I don't know.
And finally, sunshine and nice weather. It's a different energy when the sun is shining on you in Chicago. But listen, I think those two players, we're talking about them kind of together as their teammates with the Red Stars as well. But we saw it on the pitch. I mean, Tierna Davidson getting in, finding open lanes, and you just saw things kind of open up a little bit differently when she got her distribution involved in the game. And then further into the second half with the Krueger coming in and kind of being that extra outlet for the team as well. So it's one of those moments where it's like this was it. This was the game. If they had to get national team minutes, this was going to be that final opportunity. And it's not shocking that we saw all of the substitutions used in this game alongside smaller groups of players getting evaluated in the initial starting 11. And hopefully we'll see more. I think the other piece that comes out of this when we're talking about Julie Ertz specifically is, when is she going to be no longer unattached? Like, we're looking at that. She gave a little bit of a timeline update in some post-game comments. She said, yes, she's got a quick flight home. She's got to go make some calls and reconfirm some things. And that she's going to announce a club team very, very soon, possibly end of this week, by next week, the latest. And we'll know where Julie Ertz is going to play very, very soon. And she emphasized the timeline as well. She understands that she's got to get into training environments and keep getting back into form. And the only way that's going to happen is if she's with a club team and able to sort of get that kind of consistency that she's been missing for a little bit. So watch out. I guess once that club is announced, maybe we're going to start to see Julie Ertz look a little bit more lethal than we've already seen in these first two games.
Yeah, time was only going to help a player like Julie Ertz, more minutes, right? Because 45 minutes in one game, 30 minutes in another game. She hasn't even played a full 90 minutes yet of soccer since returning in a competitive setting. So any training opportunity, any game minutes are only going to help this player build up. But I think she's going to the World Cup.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I don't disagree with you. I'm not. I don't have something to sort of say like, no, no, no. I disagree. That's impossible. No, I'm with you 100%. I think.
He's young. Yeah.
I think there's some. I think there's players you can go across this and say that for, and she's one of those players. But this isn't our roster prediction episode just yet.
It's coming.
It's coming. We'll have that for you. If you want something, I've already got a few out there. You can go read them on CBS Sports. I've been trying to put them out there. You know, United States Women's National Team player stock watch or roster predictions after each international window. So if you want to go take a look at those, that is out there for you in the meantime. But we'll have a roster prediction for you all, obviously ahead of when the roster will get dropped. Of course, ahead of when that send-off match takes place against Wales on July 9th in San Jose. But that's it. That's a wrap for us on A3 today and this April international window. Thank you all so much for joining us and listening to Attacking Third. Download, follow, listen to us anywhere you get your podcasts.